Hello, welcome to Examining Fictional Heroes and the Authors Behind Them. Excuse me, my name is Wayne Browder. Tonight I want to discuss, we're continuing the series on survival stories. Tonight I want to discuss an older movie, possibly to most of you. Came out in 91 or 92. The movie is called K2. It's a movie about the first Americans to successfully summit the mountain labeled K2 in Pakistan. For a little background, K2 is not quite as tall as Everest, though it's very close, but it's more technical and therefore more dangerous. And a lot of people have died trying to summit that mountain. This movie stars Michael Beihn, who plays Taylor Brooks, and Matt Craven, who plays his friend and climbing partner, Harold Jameson. Taylor is a lawyer, and Harold is a research doctor. And at the beginning of the movie, they're climbing a mountain, and as they're doing that, they meet a group of other climbers. And these other climbers are led by a billionaire by the name of Philip Claiborne. And their head guy, Dallas Wolf, is a lawyer just like Taylor. They went to law school together, and they're rivals. And these guys comment on Taylor and Harold moving very fast, and they said they're doing a test run. They want to come back in a month and set the speed record on McKinley. So they kind of hook up with this other team and go up to the snow line to camp. And Taylor and Harold question the campsite of the other team because they're concerned about an avalanche. And they decide to camp separately. But Harold is unable to sleep because he's worried about the other team. And he begins to go out there at night, and he's tying all those tents off together. A couple of the guys on the other team catch him doing it, twins. And they won't allow him to tie their tent in. So he gives up on it, but the next morning there's an avalanche caused by a sonic boom. And because of where they're camped, the other team is swept down off the mountain. They are able to find the one tent that has the other team members in it because Harold had tied it off, but they're unable to find the twins until after they're dead. So after their funeral, Claiborne is leaving, and Taylor stops him, and he's like, looks like you've got a little hole in your team. And Claiborne is like, you're volunteering to fill it. Do you have any idea how many people have called me on this? He's like, well, who's called you that's a better climber than me? And he continues to push. And finally, Claiborne says, I'll put it to the other members of the team. And Taylor says, you could give me an answer right now if you wanted to. And he says, the only answer you'll get right now is a no. And, you know, I want to pause here. That seems to be something that you don't hear anymore. I think we hear more of, of people wanting to have an answer now or get something now, and they expect it, and people move junk around in order to make that happen. So in a way, I kind of think that's a lost art, or possibly not an art, but people are no longer willing to say something like that to other people. And I still believe it's important in its place and should be done. At any rate, Taylor gets a call later, and they have been accepted onto the team. So he goes to Harold's place of work and finds him and starts telling him the news. And he says, we go, I think he said in a week or a month, I don't recall. A month, I think. And Harold's like, I can't do that. I have a grant thing that I have to be at. And Taylor's like, move it up. And he goes, it doesn't work that way. And he's like, make it work that way. He goes, you don't know what you're talking about. And they're getting in a little bit of an argument. And Harold says, you're just going to have to go without me. He's like, I sold him on us, H, which is what he calls him. And he's like, you know, come on, don't do this to me. And he's like, yeah, the world doesn't revolve around you. I have my family and my research to think about. I just can't. Taylor says can't is BS, and he gets him to do these things. So now Harold has to go home and tell Cindy, his wife, who he had promised to spend the next 6 months with, that he was going on this trip. And Cindy doesn't even like Taylor to begin with. So that complicates matters. So they're arguing about it that night. And she's fussing at him. You're going to blow your career, your family, and everything, just so you know who can use you as his stooge. And he says, I am not Taylor's stooge. He says, when I stand on top of a mountain, and it's taken all my strength and all my courage to get there, for one moment I feel the truth of my life. And I have to have that. And she says he can't have both. He says he's going to have both. Pretty daring, pretty bold move there, I think. But it makes me think when he talks about the feeling he has and how he has to have that. And this makes me think about one of the reasons that so many of the younger crowd seem lost they don't really have anything in their lives to give them any real purpose. And so they basically wander. They don't have anything that they're really driving toward. A lot of them don't. Many do. But that really made me think when I heard him say that, and it always has. So once they get to Pakistan, they're working things out with the porters. And it comes out that everybody who has tried to go that route has had trouble with those porters. And they're discussing the weight of the rope to use up to this point and that point. And Pam, I believe her name was, she says, 6 mil doesn't seem like it's going to carry the weight. The poles use 9 millimeter all the way to the top. Dallas is like, well, they had twice as many climbers as we had. So Taylor chimes in and says, oh, there's no weight to take if we do it without fixed rope. Dallas is like, fast and loose is not the way to climb K2, Taylor. And they argue a bit more. And he says, we've been planning this trip for a year. He goes, the Poles probably planned it their whole lives. And H says, and none of them made the summit. And Claiborne's like, listen to Dallas, will you? He's the best expedition organizer in the States. And Taylor says, well, if I'd known that, I'd had him come over and pack my bags for me. So that ends the meeting on a sour note. Eventually, they do have trouble with the porters crossing a certain section of the glacier. And as they're arguing, Taylor opens the case and starts burning their money. And he's yelling, hey, look at this. And he's burning it. And the head guide, who is also a military attaché, he's like, you can't do this. This is, and they make him stop. And the porter under him is arguing with them, and they're fussing at the head guide and saying, if these guys continue, they will get an extra so much per day for this section of the glacier. But for this section only. And he's like, well, it's not the money. And then that guy goes, they will do it. And he's like, they will do it, He's really frustrated with them because they were telling him they were unable to go on, and then they're doing this. So even the military guide, what I'll call him, is frustrated by these porters. Shortly after that, one of the ladders that they use to cross a crevasse falls in, and a few of the team members start to fall, including the military guide. And Harold saves him, and then the rest of the team help pull him up. And the guy says, I'll never forget this. And later that night, when Taylor and Harold are having their supper, you know, Taylor's like, well, how does it feel to be the team hero? And Harold's like, better than being the team asshole, I guess. He goes, what is that supposed to mean? He goes, you know what it means. You know, you burn these guys' money, you do all this other stuff. He goes, do you think it's right for them to pull this crap on us every day? And he says, I didn't make the world the way it is, H. I'm just trying to get through it as fast and as clean as possible. And Harold says, we all make the world the way it is. And that's another thing that sticks with me about these two and that particular argument, because I personally can see both sides of that. And I think maybe many of you can too. And we probably lean more in one camp than the other as well, to be honest. But I guess that's what you would call an unwinnable argument. And Dallas had told Taylor, too, after he was burning the money, hey, I think I'll nominate you as ambassador to Pakistan. But at any rate, they continue on, but Claiborne is beginning to struggle. And later that night, he becomes very sick. And he has to be taken down to base camp to a lower altitude so he won't die. They have an argument over who's going to do that. And they leave the girl out, which is, she fusses about, you know, hey, I want to climb this as much as any of you. But Philip's going to die if we don't get him down. Because they're really a couple also, it appears. But it's agreed that Dallas, Takani, Taylor, and Harold are going to stay and try to make the summit while the others go down. However, they are told that two have to make the attempt and two have to be held back in reserve. And Claiborne says he'll leave that decision to Dallas. And Dallas says it's going to be him and Takani. At this point, Taylor says, no, we had a deal. You have to take the fittest climber. I'm the fittest. You and I are the fittest climbers. And Harold gets mad at him. He's like, hey, I'm sorry. You know, Dallas and I have the best chance at this. Sorry, I moved my thing. And Dallas refuses to take him. So they're at the tent, and it's dark already. And Taylor's trying to race them on the radio and can't. And Harold's not speaking. He's like, come on, H, don't do this to me. He's like, I can't believe you did that. And he says, if Dallas had chosen you instead of Takani, you would have gone. He goes, no way, I wouldn't have. Taylor said, well, that's the difference between you and me. And H says, the difference between you and me is you're only my friend when it doesn't cost you anything. So now they're beginning to Well, not beginning to, but the friction between them is becoming greater. And Takani comes back down, and he tells them that they lost their tent, that Dallas would not come down, and then Takani dies. So they call base camp again and inform them about all this. And she asks them what they're going to do, and Taylor says nothing. There's nothing we can do. We'll look for Taylor first light, or we'll look for Dallas first light. So when morning comes, it's clear again, and Taylor's calling down, asks how long the weather holds, and she responds, "It looks good for today, but later I don't like it." And he says, "We're going for the summit. We'll find Dallas if we can." And he tells Harold, or asks Harold, "Yeah, do you want it?" He goes, "Yeah, I still want to do it." He goes, "Okay, all we take is 75 feet of rope. We go up there and we come back here by nightfall. And then we go back to base camp." And they actually do make the summit. And they have their brief celebration because at such high altitudes, they have to be brief. You know, take a few photos, make the call down saying they made it, leave the flags. On their way back down, Harold slips on thin ice and knocks them both down, and Harold ends up breaking his leg. And Taylor is sitting there with him. And they're having another one of their disagreements. Taylor is telling Harold that all his life has been about him. It's been about his work, you know, about lies and compromise and dealing with the scum of the earth. He goes, "You have your family and your research." He goes, "I come to places like these with you to find a little grace." You know, he's like, you know, "I want some grace. I want some nobility." And Harold's going, "You want grace and nobility? Go back." It's like, I can't leave. I can't live knowing I left my best buddy to die on some mountain. And Harold goes, "If you want grace and nobility, that's exactly what you have to do." You know, and he gives him a little pendant to give to his wife. Says he wants him to look after his son. And so Taylor eventually reluctantly leaves Harold. And as he's working his way down the mountain, he takes a fall, but where he ends up finding the body of Dallas that's frozen. He takes the rope from him, and he takes some shots of adrenaline from inside his coat. And he goes back up with those things, and he gives Harold an adrenaline shot and like, "Hey, back. Listen, I got some rope now. We're going to make it down. Oh, and by the way, they're under time constraint too because the chopper's fixing to leave them because Claiborne's about to die. So they're trying to work their way down a mountain. And meanwhile, the chopper is about to leave. But the military guide is not willing to leave Harold up there. And he's talking to the pilot. And Jackie, that was her name. I'm sorry. I don't know where I got Pam. She's like, what's going on? He's going, the pilot says he's willing to make the attempt. He's a good pilot. We got to look for those guys. She's like, he's going to die if he doesn't go down. So they're on their way, but I wish I could remember the man's name. But the guide, he's like, I can't do this, I have to go back. And the pilot's like, we'll be court-martialed. He goes, I'll take it. At least I'll be able to live with myself. So they go back to look for him. And they do find them. And at a point where Taylor was even about to give up. And they were both just laying there. But they find them there and save them. So that is the story, or at least the story in the movie. And I don't often get into movies that are based on historical things. But I do like the movie. I like the adventure side of it. I like the survival, which it is a survival story. Being on a mountain like that. And then adding injury to that as well, and illness for one. But I like the human interactions. I like to see the dichotomy between Taylor and Harold. And I even like seeing the interaction between the other characters. I think it was all very well done. And I think the message to me here is that it's similar to what we saw in The Gray and what we saw in Pray for the Wildcats. Those two guys had been suicidal. Taylor was not. He was not that, but all three of them found something bigger than themselves. And I think that is really the important lesson. And I have mentioned that before. That is a necessary thing for us as men. We have to have a purpose. Something that is bigger than us. So, at any rate, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. I appreciate you guys spending some time with me. I hope you have a good night and a good week. And hopefully I'll be back with you next week. Have a good night.